All right, good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on our presentation around the hospital price transparency mandate and Vitalware's strategy and solution to that. As usual, everybody is on mute automatically, but if you do have questions, we are going to take some live Q&A at the end of the presentation. Please submit those through the Q&A panel through Zoom here. Please don't use the chat function for questions. They might get lost if you do that. But yeah, again, please use that Q&A panel. Other than that, we're ready to go on. Our presenter today is the Vitalware founder, Kerry Martin. He has a long history of building solutions and partnering with hospitals on making the business of healthcare easier. And just over the last 30 days or so, I know he has spoken with hundreds and hundreds of hospitals regarding their price transparency strategy. And so he has a lot of great information to share with this group today. And we are recording this, and we'll share the presentation, both the recording and the slides following the webinar. So with that, Kerry, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, and just quickly a disclaimer. We definitely want everyone to read the final rule and understand the regulations. I say during all these presentations that the chief legal officer and compliance officer definitely need to sign off. There's a lot of things that CMS put in the final regulation, but there is a lot of things they didn't. As I go through the presentation, I'm just going to cover some of the more important components of the requirement. I'm going to go through the fact sheet, and again, like Dusty said, make sure and post questions out that we can answer at the end. So just quickly, Vitalware is a mid-revenue cycle company. We've focused on charge master and charge capture. We've been #1 in class the last 2 years, and we're using the backbone of our charge master tool to accomplish these regulations. So our charge master tool does not have limits with the number of columns of data. So when Epic hospitals send us a charge master, it's 400 columns of data. When Meditech hospitals send us a charge master file, it's 50 columns of data. So we built a charge master solution that could really bring in as much data as the hospital was sending us. So we've converted that now to how many columns of payer plan data do you need? If you have 50 payer plans, if you have 100 payer plans, our tool will allow you to bring that data into the system. So that's why we're using the backbone of our charge master tool to accomplish the requirements that CMS has put on us regarding transparency. I'm going to go through the lawsuit status. I'm going to talk, like I said, about the fact sheet. I'm going to level set on some definitions. And then I really want to talk about our strategy of trying to, one, meet the mandate. And many of our hospitals have said, this is an assignment where we want to get a passing grade. We don't want to get an A+. So as you talk to your compliance officers and chief legal officers, that should be the goal, is what do I do to meet the requirement, but not necessarily get an A+ on the assignment. We want to provide transparency information to the patients. I think a smarter patient consumer is a good thing, but we need to educate those patients and provide them with appropriate transparency information. There's a lot of things that are misunderstood about hospital pricing in general, that it takes some physicians longer to do surgeries, or they choose different implants when they're doing that total knee. So I want to just cover some of the things that I think are good for the patients in the way we're approaching this. The next thing is we definitely want to protect as much as possible the hospital data. So that's important to us. I've said from the beginning, there's ways that we can camouflage the data. There's ways that we can make it hard on the data miners that will be out there perusing websites and grabbing this information. The last thing, and this is new that I haven't said in the previous webinars, but one of our clients said, well, Kerry, I want benchmarks around these service packages, and I'll get into a little bit of that, but it's a really good idea he came up with, and I think we're going to be able to execute on that, and I'll describe a little of that during this webinar. So the lawsuit, So one of the early writings about the lawsuit, this lady wrote an article, and in it she said it's fathomable to believe the federal judge will rule for the hospitals in the short term. But longer term, there's no way that Congress and the states will allow hospitals to not be transparent anymore. So I thought it was interesting that she wrote this article back in February, and then in June, she actually was wrong. The judge didn't, in the short term, rule for the hospitals. There is an appeal going on. In the appeal, they're talking about the proprietary information between the hospitals and the payers, and that might actually do some good. I just don't know if it gets solved before the requirement. So right now, the hearings are scheduled in October, and I don't know what the ruling could potentially be. And again, if the judge rules and says, okay, yes, that is proprietary information, then maybe the final output is the minimum, maximum, and average allowed amounts, and we don't have to identify the per payer plan columns or tabs as mentioned in the final rule. When we talk to transparency committees and teams, we really talk about some different strategies. And what is the strategy that helps and protects future payer negotiations? Like I said, we want to be transparent with the patients. We think that that is a good thing, but that's a big learning curve, and we got to do it in a way that's like I said, meaningful and easy for the patients. So first thing is we believe, and we have had a lot of hospitals tell us that other vendors haven't said this, but it is 3 different displays. The ChargeMaster display that was a requirement from 2019, where hospitals had to put their ChargeMasters up on the internet. There's an all services component, and there's a shoppable services component. I'll cover each of those in the fact sheet. Effectively, we're displaying a price list with payer allowed amounts. And the ruling does say a payer plan in separate columns or tabs. So we really do believe it is allowed amounts in separate tabs. Now, some hospitals have said they're just going to do their big payers. And there is a big concern that we have at Vitalware around volume. Is there enough volume to display this information? Government payers, workman's comp are kind of off the table, the Medicare, Medicaids, TRICARES, etc. Hospitals have asked, should I use a contract modeling tool if you have confidence in the data? Now, a lot of hospitals don't use contract modelers, or if they do, it's just for their big payers, or they dust it off when they're going into a payer negotiation. So the question is do you have modeling data for all your payer and plans that you feel good about? And I'm going to say that many times in this webinar. Do you feel good about the data? Because if you don't feel good about the data, there is no getting the horses back in the barn. Once you put this out on the internet, it's out there. We believe the 835 is the most accurate and streamlined approach to getting this done in the next few months. And so we believe 835 data is our best mechanism for getting the consistent data from the payers to be able to display these allowed amounts. Like I said, the benchmarking concept that a client came up with this last week is benchmarking our colonoscopies, our total knees, benchmarking our breast biopsies, these service packages that I'll talk about, to be able to look at what are the other hospitals in your neighborhood charging for those same service packages. And to me, that's critical for long-term viability of the hospital. If you're not understanding what you charge compared to your neighbors, you ultimately could lose business. So I think that benchmarking information is going to become very important over the course of the next couple, 3 years. So benchmarking the service packages is kind of a new component, but a really important component. File is machine readable, not downloadable. Do not make it easy for the data miners to just grab an Excel document. That is not the requirement. You do not have to put it out in Excel or CSV and be able to click and just download it. I say this all the time, less is more. I think hospitals will get in trouble for not doing anything. But if they try their best, feel good about the data, publish it, and CMS doesn't like what we've done, they will just continue to refine the requirements. So I don't think anybody would argue that CMS always changes the rules and regulations anyway. So, you know, again, do something, but don't get an A+ on that assignment. CMS will refine the requirements over the next several years. So this is the fact sheet that was published November of last year. And I'm going to go through some key components. So right at the top of the fact sheet, it says requirement for making public all standard charges for all items and services in a machine readable format. If you go to the bottom, it says CMS believes this information and format is most directly useful for employers, providers, and tool developers. So they are talking about something that's completely different and distinct from the shoppables that I will get into. So again, machine readable format, all items and services, and that this is for not the patients, but tool developers, employers, etc. They want the gross charge. They want payer-specific negotiated charges. They want de-identified minimums and maximums of the negotiated charges, and they want a discount cash price. So if your hospitals don't have a policy around cash pay patients or patients that have no insurance, what would their discount be? Need to develop those policies. They also go into describing service packages. So it's a description of each item and service, both individual items and services, and service packages. So individual items, right? Pacemakers and drugs. Services, two-view chest X-ray. Service packages, anything that you do in the OR. Anything where there's supplies and drugs and recovery and anesthesia involved. So a service package is really the things we would not find typically in the hard-coded charge master. Then we go into shoppable services. Display the shoppable service in a plain English, patient-friendly way. CMS gave us 70 specific shoppable services. There's an additional 230 the hospital needs to determine. Again, based on volume and utilization, which was a big component of the final rule. Volume and utilization is always mentioned. Make sure that it's on a public website. Make sure that you update it at least annually. So again, that's where we come up with the requirement from 2019, the all services component and the shoppable services component. To level set on terms, so gross charges, well, we could get the price from the CDM. That's one place to get our gross charge. Or in a service package situation, it is the total claim charge. Payer-specific negotiated charges, we have converted to say it's the negotiated allowed amount. Okay, it's the number that a contract modeling tool would come up for a total knee or a colonoscopy or a breast biopsy. Discounted cash price, pretty straightforward, but definitely look at your discounted cash price as compared to your payers. You don't want to be in a situation where your payers are saying, well, if you give this kind of discount to a private pay patient and we bring you volume, then we should get a better price than that. So definitely need to look at that discounted cash price against those minimum and maximum allowed amounts for your payers so that your discount cash price doesn't hurt your future negotiations. Service packages, we've defined that as single instance claims. We don't want a big trauma case, auto accident. We really want a kind of a plain vanilla cardiac cath, a plain vanilla colonoscopy, total knee replacement, breast biopsy. And then I have the definition for machine readable, which talks specifically about different formats. We at Vitalware use the JSON format, and you'll get to see what that looks like in our machine readable display. There is the $300 penalty. I think there's some other things from a PR perspective that your marketing teams are going to need to be aware of, because there's things that are worse than the $300 fine. So one is they say they're going to give a written warning to the hospital if they don't comply. The second thing is a corrective action plan, which sounds like an integrity agreement. And then CMS actually, in some of their documents, said that they're going to publicize hospitals that fail to comply. So again, some of those things I think are probably worse than the $300 per day penalty. So our hospital price index 2.0, again, we may go to a version 2.5. We're spinning up the data for the benchmarking to be able to give some benchmarking around those service packages. But again, 3 separate displays. Some of our hospitals already use the ChargeMaster display. Some hospitals will use all services. Some hospitals are going to use an estimating tool. If you have an estimating tool, it alleviates the need for the shoppable services. So there is a way through a non-password protected estimating tool that you alleviate the display of shoppable services. We are going to bring a lot of data together. That's why, again, we're using the backbone of the ChargeMaster tool. We're going to utilize claims data. We're going to determine the high price, the highest price of a total knee, the lowest price of a total knee, and the average charge for a total knee. But that data is coming from claims because those codes don't live in the ChargeMaster. So anything that's soft coded that you provide as a service becomes a service package utilizing that claims data. We will bundle together the drugs, the supplies, the x-rays, the anesthesia, the recovery, and I'll show you how we do that. We will then use the CDM and revenue and usage data to determine individual items and services that will be placed on the All Services tab. We'll assist hospitals in helping determine their shoppable services, again, based on volume. We'll display de-identified mins and maxes from the payer allowed amounts. If you have fee schedules from payers, maybe you have a payer that still is providing fee schedules on all your lab 8000 codes. So we, again, using the ChargeMaster tool, can bring fee schedules in. So now all of a sudden we've got stacked in a single column, data coming from claims, data coming from the CDM, and data coming from fee schedules specifically for those things that were still paid on a fee schedule. All of this is administered in the back end. There is not one piece of data that you can't override or turn that data off or say, I don't want to display that data. So some disclaimers that you can put are controlled by you, and then every element of data can be managed, manipulated, and displayed or not displayed based on your decisions or your team's decisions. Like I said, HPI 2.0 is the concept of bringing benchmarks and really seeing what those couple neighboring hospitals are doing with regards to these service packages. So Medicare put out this inpatient shoppable list, and the first thing that we looked at is, okay, they want us to display data around a 470. Well, that's not patient friendly. 470 says joint replacement lower extremity. There's a lot of different joints below the waist. We believe we need to break that out. It's not fair to the patients to put all of that different charge data into a single DRG. So this is a place where breaking the information out is probably going to make sense and be more patient friendly. So people are going to look for a total hip replacement or a total knee replacement. They're not going to say, oh, show me all the data around the 470 joint replacement lower extremity. We also brought C-section and labor and delivery off of the outpatient list because we're pretty sure hospitals don't send C-sections home within 24 hours. So the C-section and labor and delivery have been pulled into our inpatient shoppable list. Outpatient, the list they gave us, an example, 43239, a biopsy of the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, a single code, that's what they gave us. But there's 9 other codes, so 10 codes in the family based on the CPT. So again, we can't expect patients to understand the technical differences between each of those CPT codes. So we are going to bring and create service packages of that family. We're going to use any claims we find in that family, and we're going to bring all of that data together to display it for the patient, that if the doctor said to you, biopsy of the esophagus, stomach, and or small intestine, these are the components or the claims that we've brought together because they all live in the family. And because we've done it on the Shoppable tab, we don't want to do something different on the All Services tab. So again, we think that those families are a little bit of camouflage. It helps protect the data. You will also see in some of those, there's ranges of CPT codes. We think using ranges in our displays is also an ability to protect data, and I'll get into that. But that is kind of the way that we're managing and manipulating those shoppable items that CMS gave us. And then we're coming up with a ton more of shoppable items that, again, fall into different families. So this is some of the work that our VP of Compliance, Jennifer Bishop, has done literally since last November. We have hired a technical writer. We do want to put out some white labeled patient education information. We think it's really, really important that we educate patients. We're going to distribute this to all 900 hospitals that use our ChargeMaster tools. We just want consistent information. You can use it or not use it. But again, educating that patient consumer to us is a long road. It's a slow process, and we need to be succinct and consistent with the information that we're putting out to try and educate patients. When you click a link on your website, it comes to this website. It says Hospital Price Index at the top. That's a little bit of a play on Consumer Price Index. There is a logo. The ChargeMaster will display. You see the ChargeMaster numbers, the description, and the prices. That was the requirement from 2019. We did genericize for our hospitals the descriptions. I found that a trademark name pacemaker will actually show me how much a hospital pays for that pacemaker. So we genericized the drug names, we just genericized the descriptions. The cannulated screw and the size became a bone screw. So we really wanted to take the Google friendliness out of those descriptions and stop patients from looking up what wholesale houses would sell those things for. We just didn't think that was good for our hospitals. And again, we thought it was a good mechanism for being patient friendly, but also camouflaging hospital data. When you go to the Shoppable tab, and again, some hospitals will have an estimating tool instead of this, but the Shoppable tab, first and foremost, is going to make the patient select the payer plan. So that is a pull-down window at the top of the screen. They'll have to first select that. We're only going to show one column at a time. We've had another hospital say to us, well, I don't even want you to display anything until they actually do a search. So we're actually making those changes. And that will be an option within our tool, that if you don't want to just start displaying the menu out of the gate, you can make the patient do a search like the word biopsy, and then all the biopsy codes would come up, or the word knee and the total knee would come up. So we'll help the patient on this screen. We'll make it easy. They'll be able to start typing a word and a list of things will come up. So as much as possible, we're going to make it patient friendly. It will search the description, but it will also search the codes and the billing codes that CMS is requiring us to publish. You can see we have again done individual CPT codes and ranges. The range means that they can't search for a CPT code in between those ranges. So if a data miner is trying to get specific information about a CPT code, it will not bring back a search. So again, it's not impossible to build a database with this information, but we're trying to create as many hurdles as possible to protect the hospital's data. You will see in the first column gross charge amount. That is the average gross charge for those service packages. You will see a low and high price. That's the highest claim and the lowest claim. I think it's a complete disservice to a patient to show them a single price. Every time that your hospital charges over that single price, you're going to get a phone call, or the patient's going to be on your doorstep. They're going to have a screenshot of this information. So really showing low and high prices, to me, helps educate that patient consumer. And it's just the right thing to do, right? We know that a total knee is not always the same price for every patient that comes through the door. and showing those low and high prices is an educational tool. The next three columns are allowed amounts. Now we have charge at the top, and the reason we continue to use charge is because that's what Medicare used. Some of our hospitals have said, well, I'd rather you just say allowed amount. So we're having those discussions, but the problem is everything in the Medicare final rule said charge, 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 charge. So at this point, we've mimicked that. So the minimum charge, which we know is a minimum allowed amount, the maximum charge, which is the maximum allowed amount, and then the Blue Cross allowed amount in that middle column. So this could be the all services display. We could make the all services look just like this, but it would be just a longer list of items. But some of our hospitals said, well, Carrie, they said machine readable, just make it machine readable. So this is what machine readable looks like when you're looking at a pure raw JSON file. Now, again, they have to pick the payer. We're not going to display all payer information. So once they pick the payer, we're just going to display that. It says right at the top as a disclaimer, the all services display in machine readable format is not intended for patient use. Some of our hospitals said, well, they want a search button. And Jennifer Bishop and I talked a lot about whether or not the all services was supposed to be searchable. And it just doesn't say it. I don't think it's a bad strategy. But again, I think that for the most part, we're trying to follow the regulations, and searchable in the all services was definitely not something mentioned in the final rule. All right, so now let's talk about building those service packages. So again, we're using claims data. If we take the example of the total knee, we know there's some unclassified drugs from the 250 revenue code, some unclassified supplies from the 270 or 272. We know there's recovery. We know the C code 1776 is the joint device. We know there's probably some bone screws involved. There's a knee x-ray. There's a blood draw, a CBC. There's the drug that puts some nynite, the fentanyl. And then there's the joint replacement procedure itself. So $18,000 for that. So the total claim is $49,000. If that was the highest price claim I had across all of my claims data, then that would be the high price I use. Maybe $36,000 is my low, and my average is around 42. So again, the low price for a total knee, the high price for a total knee, and then all the claims together as an average. Then we take all of this data. So we've taken your claims data, we've taken 835 data, and we're going to move it into our ChargeMaster tool. So this is what a service package looks like inside of our tool. We've used a numbering system where O for outpatient, the first parent code in that family, 44389, biopsy of the large intestine. We have the other billing codes that are a part of that. Again, this is the back-end system. This isn't what patients see. We have all services, shoppable services, and not performed. Those are the cues in our system that tell us what to publish. If you made everything on this screen zeros, it wouldn't publish any of this information. If you made just the top line a 1 for shoppable and all services, then it would publish out to those two different tabs. We have the average charge, the discounted cash price, the gross low charge, the gross high charge, the Blue Cross PPO, the de-identified mins and maxes, and off to the right-hand side, you could have 100 columns of payer plan data. So again, our ChargeMaster tool doesn't care about the number of columns. The service package components, you can see an A, a B, a C, a D. Those are based on a threshold. Right now we're using 75%. So these codes have to appear with that 44389 at least on 75% of claims. We could bump that up to 80 or 85. It doesn't take us long to spin the data to be able to show you what those different thresholds look like. So it's definitely something that you're gonna wanna look at and go back and forth with us as to what threshold makes sense to include in a, what I call single instance vanilla claim service package. You also see the P44389 at the bottom for those hospitals that have employed physicians, and those employed physicians are going out on those hospital bills, because some hospitals bill separately or have a separate foundation or a separate tax ID number. And I will tell you, most hospitals, if it's a separate tax ID number, they're basically not planning on putting the professional service charges into the first round of displaying this information. But again, we have the capability of doing it. We separate it out. All professional services start with a P, same code 44389, so they're coupled together. But we don't want to do apples and oranges comparison. If the hospital down the street doesn't employ physicians and you do, and you munge that data together, then your charges are inflated. So we definitely need to break those out so that there is the distinction and we're not doing apples to oranges comparison when we potentially could be losing business. All right, so when we're managing the single items, the services or items coming from the charge master, we're gonna see that data on claims, and we're also gonna see that data coming from the charge master. So we have several different litmus tests to just make sure what we're gonna display makes sense. So you can see those first few line items highlighted. It's $900 on claims, it's $900 in the CDM. It's $20.50 in the CDM, it's $43.27 on the claims data. It's $149 versus $141. It's $369 versus $389. So this is one of the things that we want hospitals to do is spot check, right, what's living in the charge master versus what is showing up on claims data. And we'll lay those columns right next to each other. Our system gives you the ability to move those columns around to create different views. So it's going to be really easy to manage that data. And then off to the right, you can see all the other ones, the minimum, the maximum, the average cash discount, et cetera, et cetera. And those columns will, like I said, just go off to the right. When we look at service packages, you can again see our numbering system, the package. You can see the 1 in the very first line, and then you see all the zeros. Then you see another 1 and you see a bunch of zeros. Those are the service packages grouped together. And what we're telling our system is publish the first line out to the internet, don't publish the rest of the lines. But the rest of the lines are the internal information for you to know how that service package was created. So we have our 250, we have our 272, we have the average charges for all 250s for that particular, in this case, drainage of a breast cyst. We have our minimum alloweds, maximum alloweds. We have our alloweds for Aetna and Alliance, Cigna and Humana, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we have our volume. And I'm going to speak to volume several times, but again, volume is a super important component to feeling good about the data. And in this case, I'm looking at all volume that's 11 or more. And there's a reason I'm doing that. But again, managing the service packages. What if Medicare says in a year, no, I want you to publish all of the components. I want to see how much the drugs and the sterile supplies and the ultrasound guidance is. Well, we just turn those zeros to a 1, and now the system's going to publish those all out as a published data set rather than just the first lines that we have identified today. Like I said, now that we have service benchmarks coming from the SAF claims data, we've created these service packages with that 75% threshold. We can lay down next to your average gross charge the service packages from other hospitals. So we're going to let hospitals pick a couple different hospitals. This brings a lot of value to hospitals with or without. We've never really done a great job of benchmarking in ChargeMaster. We do a really good job for 2-view chest x-rays or CTs of the head, but the things that are soft coded, it was a lot more difficult to do benchmarking for. But because of what we've done around creating service packages, now we feel like we can do a really good job with these service packages and benchmarking this data the same way across all Medicare claims data, and at least give some visibility to those competitor hospitals. As I said, fee schedules may come into play for some of your payers. Maybe all your 8,000 codes are paid under fee schedule. Our tool allows you to upload fee schedules. So again, we're stacking 3 types of data into a single column. In this case, you can see I've got a Blue Cross, a Cigna, and a Medicaid fee schedule that I've uploaded and attached it to the charge master. And then anytime you click on a line item, you click on multiple line items, you can do a multi-edit, but if you click on a line item, off to the right is every single field of data that you can manage. You can just hit tab right through, it will scroll down through all those different columns of data in a vertical format, but very easy to manage, also very easy to do a multi-edit. So if you wanna change all of these to a 0 because you don't feel good about it, then it's really easy to highlight a whole service package and change everything to a 0. So data requirements, as I've mentioned, a year's worth of claims data, seasonality makes us really want to look at the full year. We, like I said, believe the quickest path is 835 data. We've built service packages for our clients based on CMS claims data. We're gonna validate those service packages when we get your claims. If you do have payer fee schedules, we need that. If you feel like you've got some contract data or a summary in an Excel spreadsheet, we can do what we call merge definitions, and we can bring that data together. So this does not always have to be all 835 data or all claims data or all CDM data. It literally can be mixed and matched based on the information that you have that you feel good about from your different payers. If you have modeling data, we can definitely use that. In some instances, you may want to use modeling data versus 835 data. We need the charge master and the fee schedule. We need the revenue and usage because, again, we feel strongly that you don't display stuff where you don't have enough usage to warrant it. And if you feel the need to publish out the professional charge master prices for your employed physicians, then we need that. All right, so I'm just going to take about 3 more minutes and go through the all services selection process. So we think about all services as some of the data comes from the charge master, some of the data comes from claims, and I just want to go through the process of doing the selection so you can see the thought processes you guys can think about in doing this. So this is a charge master at 7,800 line items. On the right-hand side, I see outpatient usage. I see a number 2, I see a number 1. So we've been buying CMS claims data since 2012. We sign a data use agreement from CMS that says you cannot display any data for any given hospital if you've done less than 10 or 10 or less. So anything that has 10 or less in the Medicare claims data that we use to spin up benchmarking data, we have to throw that data out. And CMS in the use agreement says the potential of identifying patients. So they're using that number 10 to say, if you don't have at least this many of these, we don't want there to be a potential of you identifying patients. So they're doing it for HIPAA concerns. So our thought process is, that's our data use agreement. That's the data use agreement for all hospitals that are having to display this. If you don't have 10 of something, should you display it? Do you feel good about that data? So our first filter is any volume outside of lower than 11 is gone. So 7,800 lines becomes 4,390 lines. Then we don't contract with payers. We don't negotiate allowed amounts for suture kits or needles or anything that resides in the 250, 272 revenue codes. So we believe that if it doesn't have a HCPCS line, then we can point to the charge master and say that data is over there, but we believe it goes out of the all services component. So we're going to filter all those. We're now down to 2,575 lines. We then need to look at our charge master and say, do we have replication of prices? C code 1713, my most unfavorite HCPCS code with all the pins and screws and plates and rods in orthopedic procedures living in one HCPCS code. We don't want 20 or 30 of those for the patient to try and figure out why the same code has got so many different prices. So we believe that multiple line items with different prices should be filtered out. Some people charge more for a 2-view chest x-ray in the emergency room versus a 2-view chest x-ray in the imaging suite. So we want to look at those things and really say, is that patient friendly? Does that make sense to have all those different prices, and we just don't think it does. So when I do that pivot, you can see on the left-hand side, about a third of the way down, 10060, there's 3 different codes, a $386, a $328, and a $420 charge. On the right-hand side, that same code, when averaged, is about $378. So now I've got the price from the charge master. I now need to say, well, what's this data look like as compared to the claims data? So another litmus test. The very second line item, 10060. The CDM price, $420. The outpatient usage was 25 of them in the Medicare claims data, and the Medicare average claims price for that code was $557. So that immediately tells me there's a sterile tray involved, there's a scalpel involved, there's a suture kit involved, right? It's an incision and drainage of an abscess. So right there, that tells me 10060 should not come from the charge master. It should really come from the claims data, that is a small service package. Because you don't want to tell the patient it's $420 and then the claim goes to the payer and it's always $550, $560, $580. So these are the things that we're looking at in trying to build these service packages, and not necessarily lean on the charge master exclusively for where we get the data. All right, so recommendations. I mean, you have to study the final rule. You do a lot of wordsmithing and what do they mean by this word or that word. At one time I was talking with a health system in Cleveland and they said, well, we don't negotiate different charges for different payers. And I said, I know. And I don't know why Medicare couldn't use the word allowed amount or negotiated rate, but they continued to use the word charge. But read the final rule, see where it says specifically around, the employed physicians. Look at what it says around payer, plan, in separate columns or tabs. We do know there's large health systems that are just going to do their top 5 payers. To start with, they're just saying, look, I feel good about my top 5 payers. That's where most of my volume's at. That's where I'm going to start. And again, I don't think that's a bad strategy. You need to review the charge master. You really need to do some benchmarking reports as compared to your 2-view chest x-rays and see what other hospitals down the street are charging for those single services, 2-view chest x-ray, labs, probably your straight emergency room visits, your CT of the head with or without dye. I mean, all those can be benchmarked pretty easily right from the charge master. We have to use analytics to determine the shoppables. You do need to figure out about 230. If your hospital doesn't do 230 services, there's a lot of critical access hospitals that say, I can't get to 230. CMS has given some relief to small hospitals. Again, the 70 that CMS defined, you have to display, and if you don't do that service, you have to tell the patients on the shoppable tab that you don't do that service. Definitely develop policies and processes. The patient access department, the billing office, they're going to have patients show up with a screenshot, and you're going to want to have, a script and some policy and some processes in place. Definitely get your committee together. Make sure the chief legal officer, compliance officer, the marketing people are definitely a part of those early conversations. And like I said, it's feeling a little bit like a stampede for us at Vitalware. When we did this in 2019, we had to try and bring 150 hospitals up on the ChargeMaster HPI 1.0 product between basically November 1st and January 1st. And it wasn't very fun, and we definitely want to be more thoughtful because we're displaying a lot more information that really is going to challenge our negotiations with payers into the future. So doing something early, being thoughtful about it is the biggest recommendation. And with that.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Gary.
Yep.
Just a reminder, in the Q&A panel, if you have a question, we'll stay on here for a few minutes and try to answer as many of those as we can. I think first topic you could maybe touch on a little bit, Carrie, just generically, we get a lot of questions around this, are around the patient estimator tools out there, and maybe the differences on that approach compared to kind of what you walked through today with HPI.
Yeah, so the estimating tool concept, and there's some vendors that do it better. I know Epic, a lot of the Epic users are using it. If you're going to do an estimating tool, most of them should go out to the payer and figure out what's the deductible met, what's the copays, and what's the patient out of pocket. The one thing I caution people about is that physicians change their mind 25% of the time when they pick up the scalpel. So if you know that that's the case and you don't have time to build out the estimating tool in a thoughtful way, and that your estimates are always arranged from this to this, if it just puts out a single price, I just don't think that's good for patients. And you can't do this in a hurried manner. So maybe displaying the shoppable price list with our tool makes sense until you can do the estimating tool, thoughtfully and correctly. But I think estimating tools add the components of the payer, deductible met, co-pays, and get down to the out of pocket.
All right, great. We don't have any other questions coming in right now, so we'll stay on here for just a minute in case one pops up. I'll just remind everybody, if you do have more questions about how to maybe get started with HPI or get a quote for that, just go to Vitalware.com anywhere, and the easiest way to do that is just to start chatting with us on any page, or you can go to the Get Started page and submit that form as well. We'll make sure the right person does reach out to you. Like Carrie said, there's a little bit of a stampede going on, and so please, if you are interested in that at all, I would encourage you to do that relatively soon. So someone just asked about the recording, and yep, we do share the recording and post that on our website, so you can view this recorded webinar and share that with your colleagues. And we do share the presentation slides if you registered as well. You should receive those within the next 1 or 2 business days. I saw someone in the chat function ask about CEUs, and this webinar particularly doesn't have CEUs attached to it, but we do a number of webinars that do. We do notify on the article, the webinar listing, if there's a CEU attached or not. The person that asked that question, I'll make sure to reach out to you individually and make sure you get those if you did attend some of those webinars. I saw a question pop up. Oh, same question about CEUs, so no worries there. Melanie, I'll reach out to you, make sure we get you trued up there. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Again, just if you go to Vitalware.com and chat with us if you do have further questions or want to dive deeper in this, and we'll make sure to get a meeting lined up with you as soon as possible, because I know everybody has a lot to think about these days, and you all have plenty to do. So one more question to pop up really quick. Are you hearing that some CFOs are thinking of not meeting the compliance date and thus just take the $300 a day fine?
There have definitely been conversations about that. I think that when you look at CMS's overall defense with the lawsuit, the very first thing they said is, see, hospitals don't want to be transparent. See, hospitals don't want to let their patients know. So like I said, the PR challenges are if they decide to publish non-compliant hospitals. Like I said, do something. Even if you say, I'm just going to put up one column with all of my commercial payers in a single column, which we had a hospital say yesterday, that the only way I can feel good about it is just say, this is my commercial minimum, maximum, and average allowed amount, or negotiated charge. So I do know hospitals don't feel good about doing more than that in the first round. I think that doing that is the minimum, right, passing grade. And I think that it's a good place to start until, maybe the judge finally throws out the individual payer columns, and that becomes the overall regulation. It's the minimum, maximum, and average negotiated commercial rate.
All right, great. No other questions came in during that time. So again, you received the recording in the PowerPoint that you can share with your colleagues. appreciate everybody attending today, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.